Okay, you saw the title of this video, that a revamp of Azeroth is almost certainly coming. And here's the deal. Why else would World of Warcraft's game director, for the first time speaking to the press on this topic, say that it is very likely? And it's not just what he said, because when we look at the game files, things, in fact, get even more curious. Many of Azeroth's oldest models just got revamped, some of which on the most recent PTR of World of Warcraft. That's right, WoW's latest in-testing patch, Guardians of the Dream, is stuffed full of content that could not possibly be related to the Emerald Dream. Just like our sponsor. Ugreen, they are the best charging brand around. I have been using their products daily for years, and now I'm organizing my desktop and creating the perfect charging area with their new Ugreen Nexode 65-watt 7-in-1 charging station. It lets me handle at least 4 devices at once. You gotta check it out and let them know that I sent you with that link down below. Now, this has 3 AC plugs, 2 USB-As, and 2 USB-Cs that support up to 65 watts. And as an example, that 65 watt peak output on the USB-C will fill up your MacBook Air 13 M2 in an hour and a half. And it'll fast charge your other devices like your phone, all while having that flexibility to also power your TV, your monitor, or anything else that requires mains power. It's a tremendously handy and flexible product to really level up your desk setup, so click that link down below to check them out and to let them know that I sent you. Thanks Ugreen for sponsoring today's video, and let's roll. Ian Hazzikostas, WoW's game director, and Holly Longdale, its vice president, spoke to GameSpot. And it's the format of interview that's part quotes, part explanations of the conversation from the journalist who did it. In this case, Cameron. Framing is everything, and this is how it's framed. That Warcraft is 29, World of Warcraft is 19, and that means that yes, next year, WoW's 10th expansion will land on its 20th birthday, which is also the franchise's 30th. And with that framing from Cameron in mind, the quote from Ian that it's, and again, direct quote, likely to happen is major. Taking that literally, saying it's likely, means the chance is over 50%, but taken as the words of the game director doing an interview to the press, knowing that it will generate headlines, he would not say this unless it's something that they are planning to do. Because rule 1 of running a live game is not to write checks that you cannot pay. It's a good thing Peter Molyneux didn't get his hands on MMOs then. Ian's reasoning is obvious to us all, and he puts it like this. We've kind of painted ourselves into a corner where we have all these iconic locations, but we can't really use them because they've already been used. Obviously, part of the classic appeal is the journey back to the core continents, not some fresh island dredged up from the bowels of the lore. And as far as Warcraft, the series of RTSs that got this whole thing started, as far as they were concerned, it was all Eastern Kingdoms and Outland, later Kalimdor and Northrend in Warcraft 3. That's their task then. Doing so is not easy. Ian says that he's aware of Cataclysm's problems, and that means that any revamp would be unlike what we've seen before. Cataclysm's largest problem, one that Blizzard would later admit, is that it stretched their team thin. The revamp went way beyond scope, and all aspects of WoW back then suffered. We don't know exactly how large the Warcraft dev team was back then. However, in this 2009 interview, I saw it quoted that they had 51 artists and 37 designers. Obviously, that's just 2 departments. There are many more people, but as an example, whenever we counted the World of Warcraft team size per Dragonflight's credits, it was over 700. So bandwidth just is not an issue. But that's not Cataclysm's only problem. It also destroyed Azeroth, where we had zone-based stories, right, that created a vast world full of possibility and rich lore. Well, that was all set ablaze. A lot of those stories took a back seat. Instead, it was Twilight's Hammer cultists, the fallout of Deathwing. Many places were on fire. So not only was the original Azeroth quite literally destroyed, the new one lacked that rich zone diversity. The type of story told, too, was a problem. I mean, a cataclysmic event and its immediate fallout. Cool for an expansion, but more than any other story, that would age. When Ian Hazzikostas then says that they will avoid Cataclysm's problems, he actually means a lot. Number 1, don't destroy what's already there. Number 2, focus on zone-based evergreen stories. And obviously number 3, don't bite off more than you can chew. By now, I sense though that you want me to show you something tangible in this video, right? So let's get a taste of just how much work has been done already. These Knight and Blood Elf boats set the community alight a while ago. They're absolutely gorgeous, and they seemingly weren't all that important to the Dragon Isles. Patch 10.2 then just added both of these. Both the Northrend Icebreaker and the classic human ship in full modern glory. These are in patch 10.2. And there's a lot more. We actually have new HD airships for both factions. And in 10.2, we've actually just seen, in case you need some war, some brand new siege engines. Here's the new Darkmoon Fair. Brand new, sitting there in the game files, ready to go, but not used in the game. Turn to community data miner Ellie, and we can see this gorgeous Midsummer Fire Festival asset. Again, that festival's not until next summer. But that's not all. Here are some Alliance base building components from a while ago. And look, there are way more things in the game files that aren't in the game right now, but you've got a taste of that. We can also cover what is actually in the game right now. Because think of classic WoW. You're going to think of gnolls, murlocs, centaur, furbolgs, wolves, bears, spiders, dragons, drakes, undead, scarlet crusaders, pirates. Many of World of Warcraft's mobs are updated. If you return to those old zones, you can actually see brand new fresh models that look good today. Then the tile sets used to create the Dragon Isles, those would apply to so many of classic Warcraft zones. I mean, the Azure Span probably gets you a good proportion of Northrend if you really needed it. And really, anything that is made after Legion is good for reuse in terms of game assets. I mean, take buildings, be it Centaur, Elf Temple, Night Elf Forest Dwellings, Human, Orc Fortifications. For any of these things and so many more, the assets already exist. So, between the things that have been added to the game builds, but not actually added to the game itself that we've been seeing over the last while, to the things that are in-game, it is abundantly clear that when it comes to raw asset production, much progress on this revamp has already been made. But it's not just about assets. The world has got to be right, the narrative has got to be right, and narratively, Blizzard are in the perfect position to not repeat Cataclysm's long-term narrative problem, because its story rapidly aged, leaving us in Azeroth that 13 years later is still in many ways on fire. Dragonflight contained World of Warcraft's first time skip, because from the end of Shadowlands to Razageth's escape, 3 years passed. And that's in addition to, of course, the 2 years that passed while the Shadowlands expansion took place. What's happened in the world? The answer to that is not much. Key topics like the retaking of Gilneas just left on pause for no good reason. No good in-game reason, that is, because a while back narrative lead Steve Denuser said that when Gilneas is retaken, it will be on screen for us to play, that it won't be relegated to a book. Sounds like he knows something we don't when he said that. Of course, expand that to the rest of Lordaeron, and there is so much narrative potential that we actually did a full video on it a while back. And that counts for everywhere else. Ashenvale and Darkshore suffered greatly. Re-establishing these regions for the Night Elves would be the ideal narrative reset. The prospect of a WoW 2, something that, yes, has an endgame narrative, but more importantly, is reintroducing the entire core world that is upon us. So let's talk about how it quite literally could happen. Not being able to see Azeroth as it once was sucked. Are you nostalgic for the old version of Thousand Needles that isn't flooded? Tough luck! So much was lost, and this is something that Ian mentioned in the GameSpot interview. When updating zones since then, Blizzard have done things differently. They've merely added a new phase atop what was already there, essentially a max level phase, as we saw with Warlords of Draenor's Blasted Lands and more recently Battle for Azeroth's Darkshore. Could that scale to the whole world? Could Blizzard simply remake World of Warcraft as a new phase on top of the one that's already there? The answer to that is yes, and that could be a new default experience. If players want to see what was, sure, they can just go and talk to Chromie and activate Chromie time. There you go. It already exists in-game. But there are some issues. Often phasing can cause a lot of bugs for designers, and that's hard work. Phasing may also limit their play spaces. I mean, if we're to use dynamic flying, which Blizzard surely will be using, would they not want a bit more creative freedom in the size of zones? And recently, when I was streaming with Matt, Ellie was in our chat. I mentioned her work earlier. She put forward the idea of just making a new continent from scratch. Now, when she says that, that is referring to how these things exist in the game files. Take this loading screen from the Plaguelands into the Ghostlands. There's a loading screen there because the Ghostlands, technically speaking, is in the Outland continent, because it was put into the Burning Crusade. That's why there's a load screen. So, if we are willing to say that entering Chromie time just takes us back to the old WoW, then starting fresh with Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, yeah, you could say that's totally possible. We could see these zones fully brought to life with modern tools. In many ways, that would be incredible. Now, it would be hard to not lose the charm that those places have. Like, that is a challenge, but if Blizzard wanted to, just take that clean break and have proper creative freedom to essentially craft the WoW 2 that people have wanted for years, well, that is precisely how they would do it. Ian's words sure are curious, and here they are again just to remind you. It's a shortcoming if you take a step back and think about World of Warcraft as an ongoing living world. We've kind of painted ourselves into a corner where we have all of these iconic locations, but we can't really use them because they've already been used, right? So that's what Ian said. Now, if they do a revamp and then they just start adding continents again, would we not end up back to square one? And this is where I start to wonder about World of Warcraft's structure, because in any WoW 2, I think we would see a lot more things be account-wide, say. I think the structure of the game would be a little bit different. With scaling, Blizzard can make an Azeroth for everyone, and then they can make an endgame just on top of that, within Azeroth. What is, I think, to me, a bit more ideal is roughly this. Zones are fundamentally evergreen with their own story. However, there is an MSQ, a main story, and that way Blizzard gets to do a globe-trotting Azeroth story without always having to squash everything into some new continent. As an example, in Guild Wars 2, if you hit level 80, you can just go and keep on doing those old Tyria zones to fill out the map. Each time you level, you're rewarded, be it with mastery points, boxes of loot, whatever. We all know that if a big structural change is to happen, that the World Revamp expansion is when they would do it. And I think with Ian highlighting how they are, currently painted into a corner, we're then forced to imagine that he's going to be working on how they can not be painted into a corner. Especially since WoW Classic and Classic Hardcore constantly gives them a signal of players love old Azeroth. And if you were to do this, who would you want to consult? More than Chris Metzen, the creative force behind Blizzard's greatest franchises. Because not only is he back, he's on the WoW team. And that might be a shock to you. You may have thought, surely he was always on the WoW team. Previously, Chris Metzen worked on everything. He worked on WoW, Diablo, StarCraft, Titan, then Overwatch. It's no wonder he left his job at Blizzard in 2016, with burnout being one of the things that he cited. Now Chris is working on just World of Warcraft. Bringing the world that he helped make up to the modern day, I think, would be quite the natural challenge, and it would be the main way you could actually get retail WoW back to being this position of a large evergreen game that can truly attract new players. For what it's worth, in that interview, Ian and Holly also talked about how being able to, now that they have kind of ran through the course of all the Warcraft 3 content, how they can just bounce ideas off Chris, and how they can work together to ensure that new things still feel Warcrafty. It does pretty much sound ideal. And now, let's just put a little cherry on top. Here's the problem with making a WoW expansion, right? In order to just meet players' expectations, raids, dungeons, the world, you've got to do a humongous amount of work that doesn't really scale, right? Here's the problem. What is the Dragon Isles? What's the lore? Who lives there? What does it look like? What's the art direction? What's the layout? Who lives where? There is so much new required. And that only gets them to the point of having a place for us to go and do stuff in. Now, 2 of 2023's greatest games have been built on the shoulders of giants. Resident Evil 4 Remake takes the template of Resident Evil 4 and delivers it in its best modern form. More specific to what I'm saying now is Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, because it takes the same Hyrule from Breath of the Wild, and by using that Hyrule as their basis, because they don't need to spend years just building things to get back to the point that they were able to focus their years of development time not on remaking the basics, but on new features and refined design to actually cause players to be surprised and delighted. And when that game came out, when Tears of the Kingdom came out, people were enamored by the progress that had been made, even though, yes, it was built upon the same Hyrule that shipped with Breath of the Wild. So, remake Duskwood. What a dream task. Because sure, you'll have to work out a new story, but so much of your art direction is already done. You just get to look at Duskwood. Like Nintendo not having to remake the wheel, you get to focus on making the modern Duskwood somewhere a player will love. It's handy then that so much of the rebuilding of these zones can be done using the template of the zone that already existed, versus having to build a humongous world from scratch. So, I do think that this idea of the world revamp that Ian said is very likely. That is something that is scalable to a larger team size, and that is, in fact, the team size that they have today. Last question, when? Okay, while I love how GameSpot teed it up, with WoW's 10th expansion on its 20th birthday and the franchise's 30th, I actually don't think we're going to hear about this at BlizzCon. I don't think it's the 2024 expansion. I think they actually need time to let this one cook. I think they need to make some new technologies, they need to build some dev tools, right? It's a big project, so you gotta do your groundwork first. So, I expect that whatever Xal'atath and Eridikron's plan is, right, that's going to propel us into the post-patch 10.2 narrative, right? 10.2.5 and 10.2.7 will continue that story, setting us up, you could even say, for an August 2024 expansion in the case that we don't get a patch 10.3. And after that expansion, then I think it will be time for the big Azeroth revamp. And I think you can pretty much call that, for all intents and purposes, World of Warcraft 2. Yeah, pretty big topic, but there you go. That the team have actually talked about this publicly to the press, it means a hell of a lot. And to be honest, it's an exciting prospect. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.